Hello, my name is Dan Skip Allen, and this is the Top 5 Weekly. This is a special series that I'm doing because the Academy Awards this year have been pushed back quite a ways. And I just thought, what the heck? I'm going to try to do a special series, a four-part series of the Top 5 Weekly Best Directors, Best Actors, Best Actress, and Best Picture. And, one of my best buddies of all time who really has a great knowledge of movies and so forth and everything about movies is a buddy of mine that I've leaned on him quite a bit over the years in my Top 5 Weekly. And that's my buddy Jeremy Adams. Jeremy, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. It's really great to be back with you, Dan. It's been a little while since we've done one, so I'm excited to be here. I know you've been doing some with a lot of other awesome guests, but it's always great when we can do it. And two of subjects that are very close to my heart, both Oscars and directors, and you're putting them together today, so I'm really excited to talk about this one.
Yeah, this series, I've done some different classic series in the past. 4 episode, a whole month worth of classic topics. But this time, because of the Academy Awards being so later in the year, I thought, oh, this would be good. I'll do a 4-part series leading up to the Academy Awards. And, this episode we're doing today is Academy Award winning directors. There's so many great choices here. You have 90, we're in the 93rd year of the Academy Awards.
Yeah.
So that means 92 potential picks you can have here.
Yeah.
That's a lot of choices to choose from, and only a couple of them have repeated, so there's not a whole lot of people that you can narrow that down by. But how was this really a hard topic?
Oh, it was really hard for me. I actually I have 17 honorable mentions, and I'm going to list off all of them because I think there have been so many great filmmakers and so many great films that they've directed. Some of them that won Best Picture, some of them that didn't, that only won Best Director. And I just feel like highlighting a lot of ones that have personal significance to me. I mean, most of the directors that have won, obviously did great work that year, but there are certain ones that just, when I see that director's name in that movie, it really speaks to me. So I'm going to highlight some of those just real quick at the end when we get to honorable mentions. But yeah, it was a really hard list. I feel like I have a pretty good top 5 that kind of helps, give you the full spectrum of different kinds of great work that directors have done in different decades and different eras. But, I also want to say it's tough because some of my favorite directors, like my absolute favorite directors, have won Best Director, but it wasn't necessarily for my favorite movie of theirs. So I had to leave them off the list. Just one that I'll give away, one of my absolute favorite directors means the world to me is Frank Capra, but he didn't win for either Mr. Smith or It's a Wonderful Life. So it's like, if it was either one of those two movies, I could probably get him on there, but it's that he won for other films. So that's where it gets a little tricky sometimes.
And since you said that, I will say the same thing. My favorite director of all time is Martin Scorsese.
Yeah.
And he wins for a movie that's in my top 5 of his films, but it's not my favorite or my second or my third favorite of his films.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I can't really put him
He was
above.
a tough one for me to leave off too, and I wasn't even going to mention. I was going to let you mention it.
Yeah. He was one. It was tough for me to leave him off, but I mean, when you win for not one of my top 2 or 3 of your films, and that tells you this is one of the Academy Awards is kind of a weird deal.
It is.
A lot of times, actors, actresses, people win for things that they shouldn't have won for just because it's a popularity contest in that particular year. They forget, oh wait, we forgot to give Martin Scorsese an Academy
makeup Oscar. A lot of makeup Oscars.
Or somebody in the year previously said,
Yeah.
2 for us, 0 for Martin Scorsese. And it just so happens the next year he's got a movie coming out and they're like, well, screw you. We're giving him.
And real quick, I just want to highlight these 3 gentlemen. Oh, 4 actually. These 4 gentlemen never won a Best Director, and I just have to highlight them: Alfred Hitchcock, Orson Welles, Sidney Lumet, Stanley Kubrick.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
just want to sing those guys' praises before we get into
that's
these other guys here.
that's
I
ridiculous.
know.
Just
So
think
yeah,
about
the Oscars are fun, but yeah, we could go off all day about how they get things wrong.
that's right. All right, so you're the guest, so you go. The guest always goes
All
first.
right.
What is your number 5?
Yeah, I mean, this was hard right from the get-go. For my number 5, I was going to go with something that was a little, I've got some big epic movies on my list. So I was going to go for something a little smaller, maybe a little more character based to kind of give you that sort of tone to show, because there have been a lot of Oscar movies that have won for, these kind of character portraits. Something like American Beauty, or there are any number of movies that have been like that. And the one that I almost went for, I get to it multiple, I was so close to one of my favorite movies, Billy Wilder's The Apartment, but I just couldn't quite do it. I had to go with Mike Nichols for The Graduate. The Graduate is my number 5. I think if you're gonna, it's just a perfectly told story about this character, what he goes with, and it's a very culturally significant movie right at the end, 1967, when the culture was changing. We were going from the old, culture, and the counterculture was coming in. And we've got a young director, Mike Nichols, kind of putting his stamp on this film and dealing with, the kind of the corruption in the older generation with Mrs. Robinson, this woman who's having an affair with this young college guy, and just showing the hypocrisy in the older, but also showing the confusion and the lack of direction in the younger people and what they were going with. And it's just so flawlessly done. The use of music with Simon and Garfunkel, I think, was also highly groundbreaking in, movies going forward, where you have popular music kind of helping to tell the story. You can go to something like Garden State, or any number of movies where popular songs are really a character in the movie itself. Any of Cameron Crowe's movies, so I just think it's so influential on so many levels. And yeah, it's a story about a guy and what he goes through, but just the directorial touches, the ending with them on the bus, it's like it really leaves this taste in your mouth of like there's something really extra about it. It isn't just another like character drama.
Yeah, no, wow. I love The Graduate. You know how much I love that film. You mentioned Simon and Garfunkel, the
Yeah.
music. It's just such an unbelievable film in so many ways. Dustin Hoffman is great, and of course that famous line, "Are you trying to seduce me, Mrs. Robinson?" I mean, it's just a great, great, great
Plastics.
film. Yeah, it's just such one of the greats of all time. It's a great choice on your part. I went with a more recent film for my number 5, and it's, we just came to the end of the decade of the 2010s, and I just had this movie as my number 1 of the 2010s, but it really could have been my number 1 of the 20th century, or was it the 21st century? The 21st century, if that's what we're in right now. I think we're in the 21st century. I'm not sure. I believe we are. And it just resonated with me so much as far as what the main character went through. And I just felt like the acting from everybody involved. It's my number 5 is 12 Years a Slave.
Ooh, interesting.
I just think the direction by Steve McQueen is just impeccable. The script is incredible. The acting from everybody involved, including, obviously, I think he got completely robbed. Chiwetel Ejiofor did. I think he should have won Best Actor. But there's like characters like Paul Dano that are just complete a-holes, and you get little supporting roles by Brad Pitt, but you have good role, and you have little small roles like Paul Giamatti and Benedict Cumberbatch, but then really a nasty, nasty character, Michael Fassbender. But the Academy Award-winning role for this girl who's an Ivy League student came out of nowhere. She was one of 400 people to apply for this role. Lupita Nyong'o wins the Academy Award for Best Award, and what she goes through in this movie is unbelievable. I wouldn't wish my worst enemy to go through this, but I just, as I think about 12 Years a Slave more and more and more, what the experience of the Black the Black experience is in this country, and what they've been going through over the last 100, 150, 200 years, whatever, in this country. It's really sad. And we still are dealing with some of these issues today. And I think the epitome of what the Black experience is in the history of this country is 12 Years a Slave. And I think about it all the time. And I know a lot of people, I can't even watch that. I couldn't watch that a second time after I watched it. I would never want to watch that again. Well, that's fine. I just know great art when I see it. And I think Steve McQueen is one of the great directors of the last 20 years.
But if you want my thoughts, that's a great pick. I think it's a very powerful movie, obviously, and it's a part of history that, we have to remember. We can't forget the specifics of what happened. And this was based on an actual memoir by Solomon Northrop, so it wasn't just a story that they concocted. This was real things that happened. And yeah, I agree. Steve McQueen is a fantastic director. I think we're in a situation now where, I just think there's like a loophole where he's not able to be nominated for his small acts films. But I think that's probably a shame, because I think he did, he's getting noticed as doing some of the best work this year for those. And he's a tremendous filmmaker. So it's not one that I would have picked, but I can't take anything away from you. It's a powerful movie. If I was going to go 2010s, there'd be a couple other movies that, would kind of stand out for me a little more, just because of the technical mastery of some of the other work that some other directors have done. But in terms of just being a powerful story and an important story, I think it's obviously an awesome piece of work. So great pick.
All right, you're up next with your number 4.
All right. I know that if I pick something you have higher, we do like a wait for it thing. So I'm going to think maybe you might have this one higher, but this is one of the greatest films of all time. In terms of the directing, it had to be on the list, but I didn't quite get to top 3 for me just on the directing alone. But it is Michael Curtiz for Casablanca. I don't know if you
actually
don't have it at all.
No, I actually have this at the exact same spot.
Number 4. All right, great. We can talk about it. All right. So yeah, I mean, what can I say? It's Casablanca. It's lauded by pretty much all film experts as one of the great movies, maybe the greatest traditional Hollywood movie. It just kind of came at a time where it got the formula right. It's great actors, great drama, a wartime setting that really kind of gives it that extra oomph, and just the love story at the heart of it, the themes of choosing your country and your fellow man over your own personal sake, and everything that it does is, it will stand forever. It's just one of those movies like It's a Wonderful Life that we'll always be watching it and getting something important from it as the years go on. It doesn't get old, and it just also is just some of the greatest character actors you could ever see in a movie, with Claude Rains and Peter Lorre and Sidney Greenstreet, all these great actors. And of course, Bogey and Ingrid Bergman. I mean, it's Casablanca, and none of this would have happened if it wasn't for Michael Curtiz, who was a seasoned studio director. These guys, they would make 5, 6, 7 movies a year, churn them out, but they had the formula down. And, when he got a good script, he knew what to do. He did this movie, he did The Adventures of Robin Hood, he did White Christmas with Bing Crosby. I mean, this guy, he knew how to make a classic movie with, given the right elements. And you just don't get any better than Casablanca. So, yeah, like I said, the directing, it's obviously great, solid, Hollywood black and white directing. I don't think it's quite up there with the other ones that I've picked, in terms of just the technical mastery of it. But I do think, because it's Casablanca, it has to be on the list, and it wouldn't be there without Michael Curtiz's work.
No, you're absolutely right. This Michael Curtiz, this movie, to me, this is my actual favorite movie of all time, which I didn't know if you knew that or not. I think you might have known that.
Makes sense.
There's just so much in this movie that, I mean, and I've listened to podcasts and I've read books about it. He fought for a lot of what's in this movie. He fought for a lot of the actors. Mm-hmm. He fought for a lot of the things that you see in the script, some of the different things. And he won some of these battles. And if he didn't win some of these battles, we wouldn't have this phenomenal, great film with all these great performances based on like a story based in and around World War II, obviously in French Morocco and Africa. And we have Nazis, and we have just the letters of transit. And we just have, I watched this film, Jeremy, and every time I see it, I see something new that I didn't see the last time. And a lot of times, if you look at great films by great directors, you look at 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the line, if people such as George Lucas say, I want to incorporate their film or parts of their film into my film because I love them so much. And that's what he did. George Lucas was a huge influence by adding older things from older films into his own film. And in Star Wars, he added the actual set. Rick's Cafe American is actually the Mos Eisley Cantina.
Oh, yes, it is. That's crazy.
That tells you how people love, when they love these things, they want to be a part of. They want that old film to be a part of their new film or whatever.
Han Solo's basically Humphrey Bogart, Rick, and Sidney Greenstreet's basically Jabba the Hutt.
Jabba the Hutt. So it's and I love Star Wars. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. But Casablanca, there's just so many. Just the Dooley Wilson at the piano, and this. I mean, just the couple playing the roulette. He helps the couple with the roulette. I mean, this is Curtiz, in my opinion, directed an absolute masterpiece. I mean, an absolute. There's really another film. Obviously, all film is subjective. You cannot say what people's opinions are. People are going to have their own opinion. But I really believe there really is a film better than Casablanca. I strongly 100% believe that. And obviously it's my opinion, and everybody's got their own opinion, especially when it comes to movies. But yeah, I did put Curtiz at 4 because I did have a few others ahead of him, but I just love Casablanca. So I had it at 4 as well. So that's so funny that we both had Casablanca at 4. That's
all right.
weird.
So I think we're to my number 3 then.
Yep, you're number 3.
This is an interesting situation because this is actually a movie that I've been on the record that I don't really love, that I actually think is a bit overrated. But we're talking about the directing here. And if you're talking sheer about the direction and the artistic, technical mastery of a filmmaker in bringing something larger than life to the screen, you can't talk about this without talking about David Lean and Lawrence of Arabia. I don't know if you have. Do you have that on your list there?
I actually had it at number 6.
Okay, so it was just on the edge there. Yeah. But yeah, though the story of Lawrence, as portrayed by Peter O'Toole, to me isn't the most involving story, and sometimes I kind of feel a little outside of it when I'm watching the film. But in terms of the journey that you go on, in terms of the visuals, in terms of the editing techniques, the scene where somebody has a lighter and a match, and they light a match, and then all of a sudden it cuts to the Sahara Desert, and you see a figure coming down across the desert, and the huge widescreen Technicolor that he used that was very groundbreaking at the time, at a time when TV was kind of threatening movies a little bit because people were just starting to really watch TV and not go to the movies as much. In the 50s and 60s, they were, trying to do these techniques, these big widescreen, epic movies that would really bring people to the theater. And I think, no filmmaker really nailed that in the way that David Lean did, particularly in this movie. And, it's visually just a masterpiece all the way through the desert vistas. You just think of the amount of work that they had to do. I heard somewhere, I can't remember, it was in another movie or something. Oh no, it was an interview with Spielberg. Somebody was asking Spielberg about Lawrence of Arabia, and he's like, the one thing I always wonder about when I watch Lawrence of Arabia is who had to erase all the footprints after every shot, because they have to walk through the desert, and then you know, obviously you can't see all the footprints from the previous take. So somebody had to, and you know, they're working out there with these big film cameras out in the heat of the desert on location for a lot of it. Obviously some set work, but a lot of, you know, on location stuff. And it's just stunning. And yeah, I mean, it's a 4-hour movie and almost, and it takes you through a journey. And I personally have not had the experience of seeing it on the big screen, but I do hear from everybody that is something I want to do at least once in my life, because I don't think, you know, there's many other movies that lend themselves to the widescreen format like Lawrence of Arabia. So I just felt that, you know, it was a close call between this and Bridge on the River Kwai, because I love that film too. And obviously that's another epic that David Lean did great work on that he also won Best Director for. But I feel like, you know, Lawrence of Arabia is the one that kind of broke the mold in a lot of ways. So that's my number 3.
Yeah, absolute masterpiece. You know, when you have to can only do 5, it was hard to do.
Yeah.
And I just felt like the 5 that I had meant so much more to me. They barely meant that much more to me. But I was like, how do I not put Lawrence of Arabia not on the list? And I was like, God, I'm hoping Jeremy puts this on the list, and then at least somebody can talk about it. But
yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's in the category of Casablanca. It's an absolute masterpiece. It's one of the greatest films ever. There's not a whole lot more you could say. I mean, you said a lot about it. So we're gonna go to my number 3. And sorry if there's any background noise, because a few things going on around me, like a dog.
I think we both have pet sounds going on today. It's like a Beach Boys album.
I got a dog over in the distance. I hope you can't hear that. Well, one of my favorite directors is a gentleman by the name of Clint Eastwood. If you've known me by now, you know I'm a huge fan of Westerns. And when this movie came out, it just hit me like a ton of bricks of how Clint Eastwood turned the bad guy into the good guy and the good guy into the bad guy. And he had 3 amazing performances, but really 2 great performances in the film. And it became one of my favorite films of all time. And I just think about it all the time. And I just think about the actors, Gene Hackman and Clint Eastwood and Morgan Freeman and these people in this film. And really,
I don't think you've said the name yet, Dan, but I think we all know you're talking about Unforgiven.
Yeah, I was going to say Unforgiven. Unforgiven is just.
By the way, this probably would have been my number 6, so we're even now. It was right there for me.
Yeah, I love Clint Eastwood as a director, but I think this is his magnum opus. I think he took himself really and said, you know what, I'm going to turn the tables on myself as an actor, director, whatever you want to call it, flip it around, and he ended up making one of the greatest films of all time. It's in my top 5 of all time. I don't know about other people, but I just love the, you know, it even had Richard Harris. I mean, Richard Harris gets beat up by Gene Hackman.
English Bill, right?
Bob, you know.
Bob, yeah. Bob.
He's this tough guy, and he gets completely destroyed by Gene Hackman. That really makes you realize how tough Gene Hackman is of a guy when he means no and all this kinds of stuff. But yet his house has got leaks in it. He's got fans all over his house. He can't even fix his house and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting, the dichotomy. But yeah, you know, Clint doesn't want to he just doesn't want to be involved in anything. He just kind of wants to live his life as a pig farmer, and then he kind of gets brought into this whole thing by this guy, you know, this guy who couldn't see and stuff. And there's so many different themes that are in this film that are just so great. But I just love Unforgiven. So I had to put Clint Eastwood on the list. That's just so. But you said you could have put it at 6. So
yeah, it was really close for me. I'm a huge Clint Eastwood fan. I love so many of his movies. You know, those are the movies I grew up watching with my dad. You know, he's a big Clint fan, so they have a special place in my heart. But I really do agree with you that Unforgiven is like his masterpiece, both as an actor and as a director. One of the little pieces of trivia that I always love about this movie is that this is actually a script that was written in the 70s, and Clint got it, and he's like, well, I'm not old enough to play that character, so he actually sat on it until the 90s when he felt it was the time to make the movie. And it just shows kind of the foresight and the vision that Clint had for this movie. And yeah, and it's a satisfying movie. It's kind of, your typical revenge Western story, but it's also a very difficult movie in a lot of ways. When you really think about it, like Clint, his character is not really a good guy. Gene Hackman's character isn't really that bad of a guy, other than he does some brutal things. But if you think about his motivations and what he's trying to do, you can see where he's coming from. And and obviously the West was just a brutal time to live. It was a bad scene all around. And I think all of that kind of comes through in the movie. And, this is from Clint, who came from the 60s and the 70s, where we had these larger than life, fun, action movie Westerns. And now he's bringing a little more grit and reality to it, and just commenting on the whole history of that genre. And I think it's perfect. And yeah, it was really close to making the list. It didn't quite get over some of these other directors, like, guys I've mentioned, like Mike Nichols and David Lean, just kind of got ahead there, but it was really close.
Yeah, I completely understand. That's why, like I mentioned, film is subjective. All right, so we're going to your number 2.
All right. Well, I'm going to see if we have the same top 2. This will be interesting. This could be your number 1. I was vacillating, but it is actually, this is my favorite movie, and I didn't put it at number 1 for directing. I put it at number 2 for directing, but it's my favorite movie of all time, and obviously my favorite sequel, and it is The Godfather Part 2. I don't know if you
have to wait on that one.
All right. So it's your number 2. Let's see if your number 2 is my number 1.
Well, the thing is, I'm looking at my list, and I kind of screwed up on my list.
Oh no! What'd you miss?
I messed up. I put 2 number 2s here. I don't know how I did that. But I have 2 number 2s on my list. I can't have 2 number 2. So I got to pick one of them and take one of them off and put one of them in my
you can give the other one a little extra time in your honorable mentions.
I couldn't believe I did this. I'm looking at my list. I'm like, oh no. But yeah, I'm with you though. I mean, it was hard to get our favorite directors on the list, and because of the films that they won for, they didn't necessarily weren't their best films. But in my opinion, this is my second favorite director of all time, and he won for one of his greatest films of all time, arguably the top 2 or 3 of his filmography of the greatest, and he did it in the same year as one of his other greatest films that he ever did. He did 2 in the same year. It's crazy that this guy made these 2 films in the same year. One of them is Schindler's List.
All right, buddy. So what do you want to do here? Because Godfather 2 is your number 1 and Schindler's List is my number 1. So which one do you want to talk about first?
Let's get a hold of Schindler's List, and we'll talk about that one. But I just Steven Spielberg, obviously, if you look at some of his movies, Saving Private Ryan, Schindler's List, what was the one about the Jews in the Olympics?
Munich.
So he's circled around the
subject,
subjects.
Even Saving Private Ryan with World War II,
he's circled around the subject for years. But the one that really puts the nail right on top of it is Schindler's List, with Liam Neeson as this guy who owns a factory, and he tries to save all these Jews and have them come working in the factory. And you got this German who played by Ralph Fiennes, should have won an Oscar. Yeah. Ralph Fiennes should have won an Oscar for this. I mean, he was so nasty. Then Ben Kingsley is amazing as his
Isaac Stern.
Isaac Stern as his accountant or whatever, his factory guy work. I mean, the black and white is this beautiful. Then the one little girl you see in a pink jacket, and then at the beginning you see her walking around in a pink jacket, and then later on you see her in a pile of dead bodies, and it's like, oh my God, this is brutal. It's brutal. This is a phenomenal film, and I saw it very recently because it came out on 4K. Oh God, the 4K is.
I bet it looks great.
Breathtaking. The 4K of Schindler's List. But yeah, Steven Spielberg is my second favorite director, and arguably one of his best films, if not his number one film. It's like I said, we're gonna always say film is subjective.
Yeah. So yeah, this is my number one. It was tough to figure out what my number one was, but I think both you and I are old enough to have kind of gone on the journey here where we saw all the films that Spielberg did in the 80s that, kind of changed cinema forever. Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T. I mean, these were huge monster hit movies, the Indiana Jones, all the whole trilogy and everything that he was doing. But you could see occasionally he'd have, The Color Purple or Empire of the Sun, these movies where he was kind of trying to do something more serious and kind of get out of that pop filmmaker, box and be taken more seriously. And then obviously he had the opportunity to adapt this book, Schindler's List. I believe Thomas Keneally, I believe, was the author. But think about something like Spike Lee said once, where they were going to make the movie Malcolm X, and he's like, "You can't. A black filmmaker has to make Malcolm X. It's like you can't have the Malcolm X story done properly if you don't have somebody that understands that experience and that culture." And it's like, I think this was the movie for Steven Spielberg, being a Jewish filmmaker, being somebody who had lived, having been born back in the 40s, just years after the Holocaust, and obviously growing up with it having affected his family and hearing the stories and being in that culture. I think that he was the man to tell this story in this way. And it's, on the face of it, it's a great movie. It's, it's an epic that's over 3 hours long. Like you said, the photography, the performances, I mean, you don't get higher caliber than this film, but also it's probably the toughest subject you can make a movie about. And it's like, a lot of people have tried. There've been a lot of movies that dealt with this subject, like movies like The Gray Zone and The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, and it's just really hard to do that and not have it just be depressing and just be like, well, yeah, that was horrible, and you're just kind of left feeling depressed after. But Spielberg was able to do it in a way where he artistically really does get across the horrors of it without it just being too over the top. Like you said, the image of the little girl, the image of the kid having to hide in the latrine, in the crap so that he's not found. The image of Ray Fiennes just wantonly shooting people, just for gun practice. Like, these aren't graphic things, but they're horrifying in their idea, and he's able to do that without being overly graphic. And just, we've seen, the documentary footage of the bodies and the graves and, when they went inside the ovens and stuff, we've seen that footage, but he's able to turn it into art and turn it into a story that we can kind of go along with and get the gravity of it and finally arrive at that powerful moment where, Oscar Schindler is in this position where he could try to save some of their lives, but at the end of it, he's confronted with, he could have done more. He could have saved more lives. And the power in Liam Neeson's performance at that moment, it's like he perfectly got us there to see how horrible it was, but still to follow that through line and to be touched by that idea and by that moment and that person and what they were trying to do. And it even like reflects on our own lives. Like, we all, I think try to do good things in our lives, but we could always do more. And this is a great movie that can challenge us on that. So for me, I just think, having lived through this time and having seen Spielberg do this at the time and been around to, and like you said, same year as Jurassic Park, which is like one of the great, popcorn movies ever. He did this in the same year. And, I just think for me, it's the greatest achievement for a filmmaker that the Oscars has honored. So that's why it was number one for me, for sure.
Yeah, no, and I can't argue that at all. And I had The Godfather Part 2 because basically Coppola should have won both. Should have won 72 and 74. I mean, but he ends up winning in 74. They forgot to give it to him in 72. They're like, well, we got to give it to him in 74. And it's basically one long movie. It's like Godfather and Godfather Part 2 are basically, they're together. They're just one big movie, if you ask me. A lot of, it's two movies. It is two movies. You're right. But they play together. They play so well back to back, watching them back to back, and to me, Coppola probably, I mean, we're talking about the greatest films of all time and the greatest directors of all time. I put The Godfather 1 and 2 in the conversation as two of the greatest films of all time, and you can't not put Francis Ford Coppola in that list as director if he's won a Best Director Academy Award, and he did for The Godfather Part 2, not The Godfather Part 1. And the part about Vito Corleone as a young man played by De Niro, I loved them going back and us learning about the Genco olive oil and the different things he had to Bruno Kirby and some of that stuff. But then we still were on the journey with Michael in the present time, and how he balanced those two things perfectly was incredible for me. So that's why I had Francis Ford Coppola from The Godfather Part 2 as my number one. And I know you had it number 2. So
at number 2. And like I said, this is my favorite movie. And some people might say, why is that your favorite movie of all the movies? Not even Godfather 1, but number 2. And one little thing I could say is if anyone's aware of a podcast called The Cinephiles with John Roca and Steve Morris, they just spent 4 episodes on The Godfather Part 2. That's how much there is in this movie to dip 4 episodes on one movie. They spent 3 episodes on Godfather 1 and 4 episodes on Godfather 2. So that just shows you how much there is in this movie to dig into. And there really is, because look, The Godfather is obviously one of the great movies, and it's a perfect crime story, with the story of Vito and how, his legacy gets passed on to his son Michael and the mob family and everything. But that is what's so impressive to me about Godfather 2, is because it was at first Coppola didn't even want to do the movie. He was like, I don't want to do a sequel, but they made the right offer to him. They give him complete control, which he didn't have on The Godfather. The Godfather was a really, really tough experience with the studio fighting him all the way to try to get that movie done right. So he had control. He had to, he was able to tell a story that he felt that he wanted to tell, working with Mario Puzo, bringing some more material that was in the Godfather book that wasn't used in the first film, and kind of drawing forth the story of the father and the son. And I think that's really what drew Coppola to it. Was he's somebody who's really dedicated to family. He makes movies with his family. His father, Carmine Coppola, was a musician and a composer, actually worked on the scores for many of his films. So I think this idea of what kind of man is Michael, and going back and seeing Vito's rise and how he came into, be the man that he was, how that reflects back on Michael, where he's already risen and now he's at the top. But how does the decisions he make compare with what we've already known Vito's done from seeing the Godfather movie, and particularly with what started Vito at the very beginning? What was it that drove him? And, we see, Vito was somebody who obviously made choices that we wouldn't agree with as a society. He was making criminal choices, but his motivations were always for his family and for the community. And he always felt that he was doing what was right, to help the people that he cared about. And you saw that reflected into the Godfather film, the Brando. This is somebody that had a certain moral compass. And even in the beginning of the first Godfather movie, when the guy comes to him to ask him a favor, he's like, you come to me in friendship. I help you in the spirit of friendship. I do you favors, and then I'll ask for a favor in return. That's how Vito thinks of it. But then we see Michael, who is this much colder person, this person that maybe you'd never know for sure, but maybe something broke in this guy in World War II. He was a veteran, and maybe something happened with this guy where he just isn't the same kind of person that Vito was. And he thinks he's going to do what his father did. I'm going to make the family. I'm going to build the family and more prosperous than we were before, more powerful. I'm going to make us legitimate and do all this stuff. And by making all of these moves step by step through both of these films, but particularly in Godfather 2, he destroys his family step by step. He ruins his relationship with his wife. He, push his children barely know him. And then, of course, there's a relationship with his brother Fredo. And we see what happens there in the powerful, storyline that we get. But yeah, the techniques that Coppola uses here, the cutting back and forth, that, having something in the future comment on something in the past, the cross-cutting that he does is just tremendous directing. artistic filmmaking that is just of the highest order. And even the ending scene that he gives us, where he kind of goes back to the first movie and brings James Caan and the actor that played Connie's husband and all these people back, and taking us to that time period to kind of like close it up, is it's something you would never think of. Like, of all the ways to end this story, but to do that, it works so perfectly. And even things like Marlon Brando was supposed to be in that. He was going to be there, and that scene was going to be with Vito. And just at the last minute, Marlon Brando dropped out. So they're all waiting for Vito to arrive on Christmas. He's going to come home, and they're all getting ready to talk to him. It's perfect. It's the perfect, like, Vito's in this movie, but he's not in this movie in another way. And he's the presence that's always going to reflect back on Michael and his decisions. And yeah, it's, like I said, it's my favorite movie. And though I had to kind of give the nod to Spielberg for all the reasons I said, I think the two were neck and neck for me. And honestly, if Coppola was going to win for one of these movies, I know this is controversial, I think he won for the right one. I mean, obviously, like you said, he should have won for both. But I think in terms of just the directing part of it, I think it's very fitting that he won for this. It wasn't like, maybe you could say with like Peter Jackson, like he kind of won for all three Lord of the Rings, not necessarily just Return of the King. But I think in the case of Godfather 2, like he won for Godfather 2 as much as anything else, because that movie is so well directed.
No, very, very well, very good points. I mean, he basically won for both Godfathers when he won.
He did.
Part two. So that they're basically here's your achievement in directing for both films.
But if Godfather never existed and all there was Godfather 2, he would still deserve it just as much. It's kind of my point.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, no, you're right. I mean, and the thing is, that decade he makes another absolute masterpiece.
Two, in my opinion. The Conversation and Apocalypse Now are both great films for me.
He makes more films in the decade, and he doesn't even get any kind of love for any of these other films. It's just, it really it just tells you what a popularity contest the Academy Awards is.
And we were talking about Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year. He did The Conversation and Godfather 2 in the same year. Like, two of my favorite 70s movies. So that just shows you the absolute stride that Coppola was on at this time. It's incredible.
Yeah, he really was on a streak in the 70s. Definitely 80s was a little bit more hit and miss for him.
Yeah.
But your honorable mentions is quite long.
It is. Want me to just run through them real quick, and then I'll let you. I know you have an extra one that you want to spend some more time on.
I only have three. So.
But you had the one the extra number 2, so you got to talk about 2.
I forgot about it. I can't believe I did. I'm looking at my list. Oh my God, I have number 2.
All right, I'm just going to run through these. I'm just going to say up front, some of these are some of my favorite movies, some of my favorite directors, and then some of them, just the technical mastery has to be mentioned. So I got to at least mention the guy, Frank Capra, with It Happened One Night, which pretty much created the romantic comedy as we know it. So incredible work. William Wyler for one of the best war dramas, The Best Years of Our Lives. One of the all-time great Hollywood directors, John Huston, with The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, absolute masterpiece. Joseph L. Mankiewicz for All About Eve, one of the all-time great dramas, one of the most nominations of any movie ever. Another one of my favorite directors. I could have gone a few different ways with this guy, but I decided to single out John Ford for The Quiet Man, which I think is a wonderful romance, a great John Wayne Ray O'Hara film. A little different than a lot of the John Wayne westerns that you get, but a wonderful movie. I mentioned it before, Billy Wilder for The Apartment, one of my very favorite movies. It was really close to making the list. Another one of my favorite movies, meant a lot to me growing up, Fred Zinnemann with The Man for All Seasons, a really great Henry VIII era story. All right, this is for my mom. What a movie that will always I'll share with my mom that she introduced to me as a kid. It means so much to me. I gotta say, James L. Brooks for Terms of Endearment, which is one of the great you could say kind of chick flick sort of movies. But it's if anyone asks me what's the best chick flick, that's always the one I say.
It's funny. It's so funny. It's so so enjoyable. Terms of Endearment.
So good. All right, this was like neck and neck with Unforgiven, just right at the outside of the list, but it is Jonathan Demme for The Silence of the Lambs. That movie is absolutely like perfect thriller filmmaking. Unforgiven, which you mentioned. I really did consider James Cameron for Titanic. You can't take anything away from him for the technical mastery of that film. And then Peter Jackson for Return of the King. The Coen brothers for No Country for Old Men. That was also very close for me. And then the two that I would say from the past decade that really stand out for me are Alejandro Gianurito for just the technical mastery of Birdman. The way that he directed that film, I think, was fantastic. And Bong Joon-ho for Parasite, which I just think is incredible storytelling and directing in that movie. So those are my honorable mentions. We did it.
Yeah. My number two, my accidental number two, that I had two number twos, but it became one of my honorable mentions because I screwed up, is Milos Forman for Amadeus.
I forgot it. You know what? I forgot to mention Amadeus. You know, I was like, it was so obvious, I just didn't write it down. But yeah, Amadeus would probably be my number 6. So yeah, Amadeus is absolute perfection.
And the guy won twice. He won for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's
You
Nest.
could just as well say Cuckoo's Nest. That movie is amazingly directed as well.
Two phenomenal films. But Amadeus, F. Murray Abraham, what a slimy sleazeball of a guy. And then
is it bad that I kind of love him? I think that says something about me that I kind of love Salieri.
He's so good that
which of us haven't felt mediocre and felt like, oh man, that guy's more talented than me. I'm mediocre. We've all felt that way in our lives. I can totally relate to him.
And then Tom Hulk just disappears after this. I mean, where the heck did this guy go?
He did some other stuff, but nothing on this level. He's very good in Parenthood with Steve Martin.
Lawrence of Arabia, like I said, the movie, I just don't get. To me, it's one of the greatest movies ever made, and it's a movie that has so many layers and so much depth and so much. And as a guy that loves trivia, but I also am a hopeless romantic at heart. Slumdog Millionaire by Danny Boyle. I just think it's a phenomenal film.
Really great direction too.
And there's so many things going on in that film.
Yeah, and that frenetic style that he does is it's something.
It's seamless. It's absolute seamless. Everything in the film is, and you say to yourself, how could you make such a great film? How does anybody make such a phenomenal film with so much depth and so many levels to it, and the trivia and the love and the childhood growing up and how it all plays together. To me, it's a phenomenal film, and I just don't get I talk to people, and people just don't like it as much as me, and I don't understand. I just don't get it. But what do I know?
My only thing is, I would say I probably like 127 Hours as much. I think that movie's also very underrated, but Slumdog's great. There's no doubt.
Yeah. So those are my 3 honorable mentions.
All right.
But before we go, this year we have 2 women in the Best Director race. We have a foreign film director in the Best Director race. Nice. We have a film about writing, quote unquote, the greatest film of all time in the director race, and one of probably the last 30 years, one of the best directors of the last 30 years,
Absolutely.
David Fincher, in there. So I said Emerald Fennell, Chloe Zhao, David Fincher, Thomas Vinterberg. Who is the 5th?
I'd have to look it up.
I'm thinking
you said Chloe Zhao.
Chloe Zhao, Nomadland, my number 1 film of the year. Of 2020.
Oh, it's Lee Isaac Chung from Minari.
Okay. Minari. Yeah. Oh, what a beautiful film.
I can say, Dan, I'm behind. I know you watch all of these movies because you review them. I've actually only seen one of them, which is Promising Young Woman, and I thought that Emerald Fennell did a fantastic job. I love the colors and everything that she brought to this movie. I need to see the other movies, but if she was able to win, that would make me happy. And she's also a fantastic actress in the show The Crown, which I've been watching. So yeah, but tell me about the other movies and like which of these 5 really stands out for you, because I know you have a more informed opinion on it.
I just want to share you something. I just got this in the mail. I think it's something that you might be interested to see, that just came in the mail for me literally while we were doing this video. Right
There it is.
How ironic was that, right?
There you go.
No, Nomadland. I mean, I was a big fan of The Rider a couple of years ago by Chloe Zhao, and she takes these subjects that are just kind of these mundane, like normal subjects that you wouldn't think much about, like bull riders or people who live in their van who just travel the country, just kind of making their way. But in a year where we had this pandemic and people were struggling financially, they were getting help, and people were losing their jobs and all this kind of stuff. It really was a prophetic kind of movie that came out at the right time. And one of our darlings, our Academy Award darlings, Frances McDormand, 2-time Academy Award winner, gets
maybe we'll be in the rare 3-timers club.
Maybe. I just, to me, it resonated with me a lot, especially, and it's on Hulu. I don't know if you have Hulu or not. It's on Hulu. So you could see Nomadland on Hulu right now. Another one that really it resonated with me, that you shouldn't play games with alcohol, in my opinion. You shouldn't come up with some kind of a contest and say, oh, let's see how drunk we can get and be a father or be an employee or be this or do this and just trying to me, it's a no-win circumstance. Being an alcoholic is not good for you, your family, your employers, or anybody around you. So this game that these guys play in another round, to me, is wrong, and it just shows what alcoholism, the penalty and the cost that it has on people's lives. Mads Mikkelsen is phenomenal in another round. It's a great film. Made my top 5 of the year. I think
awesome to see Vinterberg nominated, because The Hunt is one of my favorite movies. Another Mads Mikkelsen, very powerful movie. So I think that's cool.
And if you go back to a few years now, they're getting a foreign film director in there. You got the guy from Cold War. You had Bong Joon-ho from Parasite. You're starting to see the directing branch get. Obviously, the Mexican directors have been winning left and right. Getting the foreign film directors into this category, and this year they forced in Vinterberg and got out Sorkin. But I feel like Sorkin should have he's going to win for a screenplay. So I think that's his Oscar. And that's why we'll put him over there. He's going to win. We'll put Vinterberg to give him this kind of thing, just like they did from the director of Cold War. I can't say enough about Lee Isaac Chung for Minari. It's basically his story of his youth growing up. And it's a beautiful, beautiful film. It has so many touching moments. There's a little kid named Alan Kim in it. He's incredible. But the grandmother, oh my God, she's so funny. And just, I can't say enough about the grandmother this year. Again, we had The Farewell last year. Now we have this year, Minari. But yeah, you said it. I mean, Promising Young Woman. It's probably going to be Karen Mulligan's going to win the Academy Award for Best Actor. Well overdue. It's just a something that's been kind of on the periphery of society for years and years now, about this drunken college girl getting raped and all this kinds of things, and for them to kind of put a twist on it of this revenge thriller type of thing, and put this kind of interesting Emerald Fennell puts this twist on this movie, and it had a good cast too. A lot of
great cameos.
A lot of great cameos, and people that we've seen in years past, like Bo Burnham with 8th Grade, and Emerald Fennell, of course. I mean, she's in the best show of the year last year with The Crown, and then she has this come out as a director. What a crazy roller coaster ride of a year it's been for her with all the stuff going on with The Crown, and now her directorial debut with this. So I mean, I think it's going to be Chloe Zhao for Nomadland. That's just my opinion. I've seen them all, and I think it's her turn and it's her time. That's just what I feel.
Do you think if David Fincher won, it would have been one of those makeup Oscar things we've been talking about?
Because
our guy didn't get it for Fight Club, didn't get it for Social Network, all that stuff.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I really feel, even though Mank is an achievement in filmmaking, it's the production value, the acting, the sound, just so much of it is amazing. The overall story kind of drags, and it's kind of has slow moments in it. it it would really be a surprise. And I think Mank is going to be the Irishman of this year. I think it's going to have 10 nominees. I think it's going to win 1 for production design, and that is it. I think it's going to go empty-handed after that. That's just my opinion. I don't know. I could be completely wrong. But yeah.
And the other question is, how crazy is it that Chloe Zhao's making a big Marvel movie now with the Inhumans? And there's rumors are coming out that this is like the greatest Marvel movie yet. So it'll be interesting to see. Certainly she's a talent, so it'll be interesting to see if that comes to fruition.
Yeah, we would already seen if the year would have been a normal year, we would have already seen Eternals, and we would have already seen what a great job she did with Eternals. Because of the year we had, we didn't get a lot of the big blockbusters. We're going to get a lot of them next year. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some blockbusters in a lot of these awards categories next year.
Yeah, it's going to be overloaded with blockbusters because they're all going to be making up to release them.
Yep, absolutely. But that is the end of this episode. Jeremy, where can you be found?
Just Jeremy Adams on both YouTube and Facebook, and always watch the Movie Trivia Schmodown, of which I'm a writer, and I'm also doing some hosting stuff at Full Metal Trivia on YouTube. So yeah, check out those places.
And you can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. Also, I'm a film critic in the Orlando, Florida area. I write for a website called disappointmentmedia.com. Don't at me. I didn't come up with the name. I just write for them. I do a lot of retrospectives. Like Jeremy said, I've written reviews of all the Oscar contenders. Also, if you don't find something that you want me, I might have written on disappointmentmedia.com. I also have my own blog where I write on my own blog, and I wrote quite a few reviews of Oscar contenders on there. So either one of those 2 places, you can find my movie reviews or anything that I've written. I even do a little bit of awards coverage. So also I do 2 shows, Top 5 Weekly, which you're watching right now if you're watching this. And I do another show, which Jeremy has been on twice, called Bleacher Features, where myself and a guest discuss a sports film. It's a summer series. It's only going on during the summer. I'm right in the middle of recording episodes, so this summer we'll have some new episodes of Bleacher Features. So for Jeremy and myself, good night.